Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Proverbs chapter 20. So let's get right to it. Again, practical wisdom we could use in our life. I often say, boy, I wish I had this wisdom when I was 19. Boy, do I wish I had it. Okay. The great news is that any time in life is good, though. So even if you get it when you're 99, it's still precious and valuable. Wisdom will be good. All right. We left off at verse 16, where you talked about co-signing. And so let's go to verse 17. Again, one of the things about co-signing is that the Bible does not command. I say that because there are those who will say that we should not co-sign, that it is against the Bible, and that's misrepresenting Scripture. It doesn't say you couldn't, it just says if you do, you're not the best decision. The gambles that you take on, one, if you don't know the person, two, even if you know the person, the fact that you're gambling on someone else's future. You're gambling that someone is going to pay off the debt. Somebody's going to live to pay off the debt. They're going to be in a position to pay off the debt. That's what you're gambling. You're saying when you co-sign, I am being security for that. I'm the security for this debt. He said that's foolish. Verse 17 says, "Food gained by fraud is sweet to a man, but afterwards his mouth is full of gravel." Okay. Um, Verse 18, "Finalize plans with counsel and wage war with sound guidance." Now that said, I wish I had this knowledge when I was 19. I think all of us could probably say that, but finalize plans with counsel. Seek out counsel, godly counsel, wise counsel, right? Wise counsel. Verse 19, "The one who reveals secrets is a constant gossip. Avoid someone with a big mouth." Um, there are people who are like that, right? They just spill whatever you tell them. Truth be told, probably more people than we like to admit, probably even with ourselves, that could be even more. In other words, um, how many times I can look at myself and says that I had a big mouth and said things that I shouldn't say, revealed things that I shouldn't. Yep. So um, now here's the wisdom: be careful what you tell, right? Be careful of the secrets you reveal about yourself. For that reason, verse 20, whoever curses his father or mother, his lamp will go out in deep darkness. Now, this is kind of interesting because in the one of the Ten Commandments, when it says, "Obey your father and mother, that it may go well with you, that you may live long on the earth," Paul came along and said this was the first commandment with a promise. So now we also say here that whoever curses his father and mother, his lamp will go out in the deep darkness. So the sort of reverse is also true. If you curse your father or your mother. Verse 21, "An inheritance gained prematurely will not be blessed ultimately." A lot of ways to look at that. An inheritance gained prematurely will not be blessed ultimately. Verse 22, "Don't say, I will avenge this evil. Wait on the Lord, and he will rescue you." Now, it's going to come back and say some things right here when he says that um, don't say, I will avenge this evil. But then he says, wait on the Lord. Now, of course, there's another scripture that says that vengeance is mine, I will repay. In other words, if you take it upon your heart to avenge evil, that's not the wisest thing. And it may not even be the most satisfying act you do. Sometimes we think it could be, but verse 23, differing weights are detestable to the Lord, and dishonest scales are unfair. We've already covered that. Verse 24, a man's steps are determined by the Lord. So how can anyone understand his own way? Now, this is very interesting here, this statement. A man's steps are determined by the Lord. So what does that mean? Does that mean that, and again, this is a general statement. So again, this is just something that we're exploring just by way of thought. Because again, we don't always know that our steps. And so when he says steps, what does it mean? I do think about this when I think about my own life. 'Cause I live in the Chicago area, and the thing is, how did I end up in the Chicago area? I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. I could have ended up in Arkansas. I lived in Los Angeles. There was really no connection for me for here in Chicago. Um, but I think sometimes too that here that God, I have been the most content here in Chicago. The doors have opened for me here in Chicago. I oftentimes think about, so I just, that's just one aspect to think about, to ponder. When I think of, that a man's steps are determined by the Lord. Even how I came about being in Chicago, it's in and of itself is a story. That's a very interesting story. And then how, when I got here, how God opened the door for me to walk through. Now I'm in the trades, so that's one of the things that God opened the door for me to be in the trades that I'm in. I can only attribute that to this, like this kind of statement here: a man's steps are determined by the Lord. That out of all the stuff that I could have wanted to be, all the things I could have wanted to be, those doors wasn't open. Here's another example. A lot of people ask, how come you're not a pastor? And I tell people, because God didn't open those doors. And I don't mean that to be religious or kind of cavalier, but literally, God hasn't, to me, opened those doors. So when he says, so how can anyone understand his own way? That's true, he can't. But it is interesting when I think about, like, my life, okay, when I think about my life, the doors that God has opened for me, that's, that's worked. That he's preserved me. Verse 25, he says, it is a trap for anyone to dedicate something rashly and later to reconsider his vows. It's a trap, he says, to dedicate something rashly. In other words, before you do it, before you commit yourself, think about it. Remember, he said earlier, seek counsel before you make plans. Bounce it off the walls of some people, and then listen to them if it's wise counsel. So it's a trap for anyone to dedicate something rashly and then later reconsider his vows. Verse 26. A wise king separates out the wicked and drive the threshing wheel over them. Now notice that a wise king, not all kings are wise, not all leaders are wise. They separate from the wicked. Verse 27. The Lord's lamp sheds light on a person's life, searching the innermost parts. The Lord's lamp. sheds light on a person's life, searching the inmost parts of the earth. You know, you, we can, our greatest, not greatest, I should say, but one of the greatest inabilities is to see a person's heart. I mean, a lot of people can fake a lot of things, but to see a person's heart. When God's lamp sheds light on a person's life, searching the innermost parts. Verse 28. Loyalty and faithfulness delivers a king. Through loyalty, he maintains his throne. Now, that goes both ways, is what he's saying right here. When you are a valuable person, you are a value to that leader. Verse 29. The glory the glory of young men is their strength, and the splendor of old men is gray hair. Well, okay. It's one that has gray hair, right? He says the glory of young men is their strength. How true is that? I mean, like now, I'm in my 60s, so yeah, I can look back on youth and think, yeah, it's like, wow, the young days. The glory of young men is their strength, and the splendor of old men is their gray hair. Okay, if you like that, okay. But yeah, gray hair, I guess it is. I don't dye my hair only because my thing is I'm not in that respect. Vanity has not appealed to me. My thing is it is what it is. I don't. As you kind of look here, there's some balding here. Certainly, I never had long hair, but I never was going to be one that had patches. And I see sometimes people with patches. There was one of my barbers for many years. He moved away with to my sorrow. But I remember one time watching him as I was waiting for him to cut my hair. See, my thing is this is right here. When it gets too short, this is as far as it's gonna grow, and then it's just I keep it low. But I remember watching him one time. There was this guy. He was almost like he was scout sculpting this guy. The guy had like a patch right here, and then bald all around, and he was trying to do something to that. I guess his thing is, look, the guy paid me, right? The guy paid me, and now I'm like, okay, that don't even look good. Anyway, I do digress. Verse 30, lashes and wounds purge away evil, and beatings cleanse the innermost parts. Now, this is something here we definitely want to get wisdom on. I say that because when I was a young parent, these are the scriptures that we use to our understanding in raising our kids. So, in other words, we beat the crap out of them. When I say beat the crap out of them, like I say, when I was growing up, funny because my mother would use whatever found its way into her hand. For example, Hot Wheel tracks, the little Hot Wheel cars, Hot Wheel tracks. Yeah, they make for good switches. And then, of course, there was the standard switch branch. And there was an art to it. Okay. Of course, a belt, extension cords. Now, I say that because when you use those kinds of things, lashes and wounds. Now, here's the thing that we need to be careful about in our culture today. The lashes and the wounds will land you in a lot of trouble. Okay? A lot of trouble. And there can be a thin line between spanking and child abuse. Spankings are not illegal. They're not illegal. There is no law that says that if you spank your child, it's illegal. But not so fast, because child abuse, as I said, there's a thin line between child abuse and spanking. You don't want to fall on the child abuse side. And who decides the child abuse? Usually some ungodly person who's not necessarily a biblical person. Now, let's start with understanding the wisdom of raising children. Now, remember, this is only one verse out of many verses about raising kids. So you just can't only look at this verse. And that's the mistake that unlearned people, biblically unlearned people have, and then they find themselves then on the child abuse side. You have to understand something. If you go to the hospital and there are wounds, bruises, bruises on your children, on anywhere, you can be reported. Sometimes they're obligated to report. Then that gets child services involved, and that becomes a whole nother nightmare for you. My point is, avoid it. That's the point. You can get a zealous person that your child could just fall on the coffee table, and they got a black eye because they fell on the coffee table, and you get some, to me, stupid nurse or whatever who calls child services. And that's fine if child services come and say, well, let's take a look what happened, X, Y, Z. I've had to answer to child services, not because of beatings. We had a fire in our house. And once they heard my explanation, they put unfounded. But abusers are going to be a little more harder yet to get past. But my point is, the reason why we get there is because of this. When you look at language like this, you want to be very careful. You don't live in a time where it says that wounds, when it says purge away evil. But it's not the only thing that purges away evil. Not the only thing. In other words, so again, balancing wisdom with how we're going to discipline our child. Remember, also teaching, also correction, also nurturing. Make sure that you're doing all of those things and not just beating the crap out of your child, especially when they make you angry. Especially when they make you angry. So, again, the idea here was, of course, stern discipline. Notice he says it purges away evil. And then he says, and beatings cleanses the innermost parts. Now, what do they mean by that? Again, to be disciplined. Discipline is corrective. Timeouts are not corrective to me. Timeouts doesn't cleanse the innermost parts. So now you have this clash between psychiatry, modern days psychology versus a biblical way. But keep this in mind, the biblical way is not just beating the crap out of your children. So now you go to the extreme. A lot of times when people get some learning in them, they think, well, the biblical ways, our ways is better than the biblical ways. The problem is that modern day psychology is not aiming to clean the innermost parts. They're not aiming to produce godly children. That's the difference between why the world had its way of raising kids. In other words, the world does not believe you should spank your kids at all. Really, so that's why they come up with timeout. The folly of timeout is that you think your child is going to come to reasoning. You know how all the TV shows, at the end of all the TV shows, the children come up and go, Mom, I'm sorry for stealing, and I'm sorry for this, and I'm sorry for that. Oh, it's okay. That's scripted writing, people, not reality. We start with sinful nature. Okay. So my point is, be very careful when you discipline your kids not to leave wounds, not to leave. When we talk about beatings, I wouldn't even use the language of beatings. Well, because if a child service person says, "How do you discipline your kids?" Well, I beat them, like the Bible says. I beat them like the Bible says. Oh, that's unwise. And like I say, so spanking, by the way, have a disciplined way of spanking. Have a way that you spank. Typically, swatting on the bottom, uh, not belts to the backs or switches to the backs, but because they take the shirt off and they see whelps, it's over for you. Okay, guys. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.